So hi everyone, my name is Grace Maswa. Welcome to Vijana Tupo Talks, which is a platform that provides sustainable and workable solutions for young people. Today I am joined by Pius. I cannot pronounce her first name, so I'm just going to let her pronounce her first name. But our topic today is on gender inequalities and COVID-19. Now, just to put matters into context, COVID-19 has affected everyone, and it is not choosing who to affect and who not to affect. Literally, it's global. It's a global pandemic, but it has affected different groups differently. So you find that young people are affected differently, men are affected differently, and women are affected differently. And having that we already had a gender gap and gender inequalities, in the society, this pandemic has come to accelerate what we already have. So today I am joined by Pius. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and we can dive into the discussion after her introduction. Welcome, Pius.
Thank you so much, Grace. My name is Mkpouto Pius. I work a lot with young people, but most especially with young women, so women and girls. I run an organization called She in Charge, and She in Charge is a gender-based organization that primarily focuses on closing the gender inequality gap, especially in rural communities where we don't have a lot of support systems to help these women. So yes, that's really my focus. And I'm really pleased to be having this talk today.
I'm very pleased. Don't mention that she is a Cambridge scholar. So she's a very smart lady. Yeah, she's a very, very smart lady. So we're just going to dive into the discussion. It has affected other crises that we have had. So from the Ebola crisis, it affected women in Central and West Africa very differently. Most women were, just women in the market, women just taking casual jobs in the market. Most of them became unemployed and they had to go home and take care of their children. And you see this time, schools are closed. That means that a woman has to choose on whether to quit their job and take care of the children at home, especially for those that do not have very stable income. Yeah.
Yes.
Either they take care of their children at home or they go back to work.
Yeah.
So what can you say about this? How is this pandemic affecting women economically, and what can we as young people in our communities do about it so that we can try and just aid in this?
Yes. Grace, you're right. The things you point out are quite salient. I think it's a very important introduction, like you said, to mention that COVID-19 affects everyone, It doesn't selectively affect a certain group of people or other group of people. Every single human on the planet, as we know, has been impacted by COVID-19 in some way to varying degrees. However, because of the uniqueness of certain individuals, certain groups of individuals, you find that people are uniquely affected depending on what group they find themselves or what protected characteristic, let me use that phrase, they find themselves. So for example, with a protected characteristic of gender, you find that the impact is different because pre-COVID-19, we've always had institutions that created these differences. So a typical example is just to delve into the economic differences between men and women, right?
Yeah.
So the informal sector is populated by women. And that is especially in the developing countries, particularly in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. It is a thing, it's known that the informal sector is populated by women. You go to the market, how many people sell in the market? You find mostly women and girls. You find people hawking in the street, where street hawking is allowed. It's mostly women and girls. You find small and medium-scale businesses, mostly populated by women and girls. And these are the sectors that are either unregulated by government, so which means that in terms of palliatives, palliatives to support such businesses, these are the sectors that are very least likely to get such palliatives or such support systems. These are sectors that are mostly self-funding in a way, and they depend on the income that comes in day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, right? So you see that because of the structure of the informal sector, or the sector, of work, of the economy, that is populated by women, and how these sectors depend on day-to-day income to survive. A shutdown of systems, a shutdown of countries, a shutdown of markets in the name of lockdowns will obviously have negative impact for the people who mostly predominantly populate these sectors. And to put it into context, to make it clear why this is a huge problem, right? It's a problem because if you look at offices, right, blue-collar jobs, where Muslim men, where it's populated by Muslim men, you find that these people have, the government trying to step into, to do things like reduce job losses, to reduce salary cuts. Government is trying to regulate how certain establishments can retrench staff, at this point in time. And you find that people who work within these sectors, these regulated sectors, the blue-collar sectors, are more protected from the economic impact of COVID-19. This is not the case for the other sectors, which is where we find mostly women. So exactly, you see how this, this just shows the disparities in effect of COVID-19. And what young people can do to raise awareness of this these issues is, first of all, to even to seek knowledge, to be aware that these issues exist. Because I find in my experience that it is a reality that some people don't even know that these disparities exist. People think, oh yes, COVID-19 affects everyone. People are sick. People have to stay at home. Those obvious those obvious effects are the things that people see. But I think that people need to start seeking knowledge about those subtle disparities, those things that don't seem obvious to the eye, to seek that knowledge. So not just the knowledge about the existence of these problems, but about the nature, what underlies these problems and the gravity. Because I think that it's important that we understand the enormity, the gravity of these issues, so that we can, so that we can, understand why it's the problem and why we should be talking about it. But so after seeking knowledge, the next best thing to do is to start and to join conversations on these issues. In these times, this period where everything is happening virtually, social media has become a very important space for, heightening communications, holding conversations, creating awareness. And I think that now more than ever is when young people should utilize the mechanism of social media to start conversations around these issues, to engage their peers, to engage their colleagues, to engage, both people who are affected and unaffected. Because I think it's like you said, Grace, earlier, that for us to really, have effective conversations around gender inequalities, we need to engage all stakeholders, and that involves including boys and men in the conversation, right? And this is one aspect that She in Charge have been really, really interested in. Really accelerating, including boys and men in the conversation, because we think that it is important. That is one way to create systemic change, right? To get people to start to question the origins of gender inequality. So we think that when we are asking people to start conversations, people should we should target where do we want to start these conversations? Who do we want to involve in the conversations? Who are the stakeholders that we should be involving in the conversations? So we should be not just be talking to the people who are affected, having conversations with them. We should be talking to other people who surround these people who are affected, in this peculiar way, so that they are sympathetic towards the people who suffer this effect, and in this case, women and girls, but not just sympathetic, but more willing to put in the work. I feel like when people understand what the problem is, then they are more able to provide support, right? To provide support and any kind of, to build networks or systems that help women and girls. But so beyond starting conversations, there are already existing conversations happening, just like what we are having now. This is an important conversation. So I think that young people should seek such conversations and join the conversation. We have tweet chats, about the effect of gender, the effect of COVID-19 in different spheres. And I think that young people should be seeking to join such conversations online within their circles to lend their voices, to lend their thoughts, to lend their opinions on what is happening, the effect of COVID-19 on women and girls. And I think this is important mostly because how women and girls in one community are affected may not be exactly the same way that, women and girls in another community are affected. There may be slight discrepancies. So it's important that we have inter-community conversations to compare and contrast these effects, and also to validate that they exist. So it's not as if it's something that's only happening within our community, but we sort of have an understanding that these impacts happen across communities. But not just to understand the differences, but to be able to compare solutions that are being put in place to mitigate these harms in different communities, so we can learn a thing or two. So I think that it's important that young people, join such conversations as a way to create awareness. But also, lastly, what young people can do, and which I think is very important, is to engage agencies of government, and policymakers to stay accountable. Because, yes, absolutely. Because classic pandemic scenario is the likelihood for government to refocus resources from one aspect to another aspect. And for every time that there is a repurposing of resources or a refocusing of resources from one aspect, of the economy to another aspect, there is always a shortfall. And a lot of times it's not good. So I think that what young people can do is to, raise up these issues with government, policymakers, leaders of thought, to make sure that there is an accountability in how, in the kind of support systems that are put in place, or in maintaining the already existing support systems for women and girls.
Yeah. I think that there's something that you have that has just come out so loudly, the importance of just removing the assumptions that we have as young people and getting to communicate with, and just getting to gather data, that real facts, and having to surround yourself with the issue so that you can get what really is the problem. That is the best way that we can to create good solutions and to create long-lasting solutions. And I also love the fact that there's something that you have also said, that just brings the empathetic, how we need to be empathetic with the situations that we have, situations that are surrounding our communities. So we need to put ourselves in the shoes, and that only comes by us gathering, accurate data, knowing
Absolutely.
what is going on, asking what is going on, and not just communicating, but asking the right questions. Because I feel like most of the time we just say or we just do, but we do not ask the right questions.
Exactly.
So that was good. That was nice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the second question would be, what are the things that we need to change for the future? Because now that we have learned, there's some things that are coming out so strongly during this pandemic. And I was listening to the UN Secretary General, and he was also concerned about the numbers of gender-based violence that are coming up during these COVID-19 days. And it was such a concern for him because the numbers have doubled. You can imagine that people are at home, there's lockdowns, there's quarantines, and people are confined in their own homes. So, and agencies and organizations that maybe could have helped the victims are now closed, and people cannot be able to access the help that they need. What changes do we need to make for the future in terms of this?
Okay. So I think that with regards to how, thinking about the future, we need to put in place systems that change the gender dynamics, especially with things around like parenting, for example, right? So classically, in a large part of the developing world, we still have systems that skew the burden of care towards the women disproportionately. What that means is that you still assume that women should be the primary caregivers, the ones who take care of the children, whether or not they have jobs that they can do, And these things are culturally entrenched, they are socially entrenched, religiously entrenched within certain systems, and are assumed to be the normal. Now, these things, being as they have their minute, side effects like necessary pressure on the women, they are more pronounced in instances like this, in a pandemic like this, right? Because now you find that women still feel that pressure to outdo themselves, to outdo themselves. I think that we need to gradually work our way into changing the gender dynamics, within our societies. And it would sound like cliche to say empower women or to take up more opportunities, but how do you do that if we still always think that women should subconsciously or should automatically assume certain gender roles? How do we do that, right? So I think this is where it is important that more than ever, we include boys and men in these conversations to create an understanding of why gender stereotypes of any kind can be problematic, especially for instances like this. Exactly. And then we need to actively discourage, norms, traditional norms, beliefs, customs that put women, as primary caregivers. I said that before, just for the reasons I mentioned, that it can become harmful when we have pressures caused by pandemics, and yet people still expect women to instinctively, be super women, to take care of the home, give care to the sick people, cook, clean, and still, be in a Zoom meeting, for example, if they manage to have a blue-collar job, or, sustain the home somehow. Yeah. But very importantly, with regards to gender-based violence, there's no real straightforward answer, straight-cut response to say this is what we need to do to mitigate the impact of gender-based violence for the future. But there are three recommendations, three possible recommendations. And so starting with deconstructing the systems, that make women come off as property, right? So we need to deconstruct the systems that place women as property. Because it is on the backdrop of these systems that, anyone would brutalize a woman. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit. But secondly, we need to provide, social support systems for women to report abuse, right? So very important. Yeah. We need to provide social support systems, and any existing support system need to be strengthened, especially in a pandemic like this. Need to be strengthened, need to be emphasized, need to be signposted so people know where to look for, what to look for, who to look for in instances where they are abused. And thirdly, we need to empower women to report abuse. So you see, I'm going to walk these things. I'm going to walk these from the ground up. Starting from the last thing I said, empowering women to report abuse. I mean, it sort of makes sense. If a woman is abused, the first thing that would come to your mind is to say, yes, why didn't you report it? Why was it not said? Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you do this? The whys are numerous, starting from stigmatization, starting from, being shamed, starting from not even feeling comfortable to report these issues, starting from the fact that women are not protected in the system, right? How many anonymous reporting platforms do we have for women to report these issues? How many of these women feel like they can report these issues and still remain functional members of society without people feeling like, without people pointing fingers and saying, you broke your home, you should have stayed, you should have stayed put for your children. And that kind of rhetoric that becomes derogatory in the long run. So I think that going further, we need to empower women more to report abuse, do everything, use the agencies of government to empower women. And empowering women can be things as simple as making anonymous reporting systems anonymous. Making sure that if women report and they're told that it's anonymous for whatever reason, these women, it cannot be traced back to these women. It's that kind of trust we need to build within the systems, for us to get people to buy into any kind of social support networks that we provide. And if we are saying we need to empower women, or we need to empower women to report abuse, it means that should happen on the backdrop of already built, already existing social support systems for women to report abuse. The question is, how many of such social support systems exist? When they do exist, how many of them are accessible? How many of them are properly signposted? How many women know where to look for or where to go when they have these issues, right? And how easy is it to do that? Can you just pick up your phone and dial a number or dial a USSD code, and you are sent, you are connected to an operator, toll-free, to report abuse. How easy is that? We need to, digitalize these network, this support system, so that anybody, anywhere in their homes, no matter where, in their villages, whether they own a smartphone or just a normal GSM phone, can report abuse without having to leave their homes, without having to risk anything. I think that that social support system needs to be firmly grounded using all of the means we have, including the advance in technology that we are currently enjoying. And then lastly, even if we manage to empower women to report abuse, and we have magnificent social support systems, if we do not deconstruct the systems of patriarchy that continue to treat women as property, that continue to merchandise women, we gain nothing. Women will not report abuse when they feel like my husband is my everything. My husband is, or the man in my life is the only reason why I can survive, right? That may be true or may not be true. We have no, I'm not a specialist in emotional issues, but I do know that mindsets like that can ultimately become damaging, especially in instances where people are suffering abuse. And when I say such systems of patriarchy that can be harmful, I mean with things like, in certain parts of the third world, we still have traditional rights, cultural rights, traditional beliefs that instinctively place women at second place, instinctively place women as property to the men. And this is a problem. I'm going to explain exactly why it's a problem. Yeah. It's a problem because, it's a problem because has it not occurred to anyone that it is not that it is violence that has been on the rise during the COVID-19 lockdown? It is gender-based violence. If the reason for this violence is stress, if it is stress, or the fact that we are locked at home and we need to vent our frustration, or that people are economically, down, people don't have access to money, so they're frustrated, they're angry, why are men not meting out violence on fellow men? Why are women not meting out violence on fellow women? Why is it one gender towards the other? And why is it predominantly the strong gender, and I use quotes, air quotes, the strong gender meting out violence against the weak gender, use air quotes? It is because of already existing social structures, narratives, norms that say to members of one gender, this person belongs to you. They're your property, so you can use them how you want. It is the only underlying reason why a man will lift his hands against a woman, an adult grown human, to beat her up. It is these underlying, norms, cultures. And I don't want to mention some of them because that conversation can go really, really, it's always a touchy conversation when you start to pick on certain cultural practices that are very dear to our hearts. But I'm just going to say that it's about time we start to investigate, these structures, to think about how they affect women, and then, think of how we can change them, modify them, so that they just stop harming a significant proportion of the population.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I think that for us to actually just uproot, to get rid of this bad fruit, the bad fruit of gender-based violence, we need to go down to the roots. Absolutely. We need to go down to the roots and to break the system that has been constantly raised by the society.
Absolutely.
And I believe that even the government policy makers should use this time to be so aware of the things that are happening, to be so aware of these things that are being accelerated, and come up with policies and even just systems that are going to protect women for once, exactly. Just make women feel safe. The idea that you have said that having anonymity in reporting gender-based violence, just feeling safe.
Yes, absolutely.
And one thing that I must say, even for our country, Kenya, one thing that I must say is the trust. There is no trust that has been created between the citizens and the system. So somebody is fearing that, okay, I'm going to report this, and after I report this, how will the society see me? I mean, am I going to be viewed as that woman that just cannot keep her home?
Exactly.
Or is the government going even to leak my information? Because there is not trust between the society and the systems that we have. And I think that was fantastic. We need to change the system. We need to take this time and to understand the problem as young people, and advise all our listeners today that as young people, we need to gather data that is factual. What is happening? What is happening in our societies? What is happening to your neighbor? What is happening in your community? Why is it happening? And what can you do about it? How can you stand in the gap for these situations that are happening around us? Because once we remove the assumptions that we have, then we can negotiate the difference. Once we remove that assumption of it's just issues between man and woman, it's just marital issues. Once we remove those assumptions, then we can come up with policies, and we can come up with laws that are protecting women. So that was fantastic. Fantastic. I told you guys that she's a Cambridge scholar, so she's smart. And that was really fantastic. I've learned a lot personally, and I wish we could go on for just long, but I had scheduled for the podcast to be 30 minutes so that we can have people listen in and to just get the key points that they need to get during this time. And young people, kindly, Vijana Tupo, as we always say, it's providing sustainable and workable solutions for you as young people, and it's trying to create leaders in the society and in the communities, leaders that can stand in the gap for these situations and not just be silent or just go to base their solutions on unemployment or issues that are affecting them, but their solutions should be wholesome to the whole community. So that was wonderful. Thank you, Pius. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And I'm going to this is going to be uploaded on our YouTube channel for many young people to learn and to understand why we need to focus on this issue and to just get more on this issue. And then it's also going to be uploaded on our podcast on Anchor FM, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Kindly check it out. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace, for having me.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.